Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Schiz and Giggles podcast. My name is Kody. I live with schizophrenia.
And my name's Kit, and I live with schizoaffective disorder.
And guess what, Kit?
What?
Llamas. That is the topic of the day, and we're going to get into that. But before we do, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been reaching out. We did take a couple weeks off. We always forget how supportive our individual communities are. This is the first time we've had to take a good amount of time off with this podcast, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for you guys being incredibly supportive and understanding. And it's been so cool to see you guys, recognizing that we are people living with mental illness, which means we do have to, unfortunately, take unexpected times away. So we just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about where we've been, what's been going on before we jump into the topic of llamas. So I was traveling. This has been my busiest season ever. I've been to LA, San Diego, New York, Austin, Texas, all within the last 2 months, and a few other places. So on my end, it's just been incredibly busy, and I'm starting to get into my slower season, less conferences, less speaking events, which means me and Kit can get back to prioritizing this. So that's what's been going on my end. Kit, how about you? I know you've also had fun stuff going on, some not fun stuff going on. So if you want to give people a little update on where you've been too.
Well, I've been kind of goofing off in the cosplay world. So I've had a convention. So I went and hung out with my friends in DC and dressed up in funny clothes and had a great time. But after all of that, I ended up not being well. So I ended up getting super anxious and I couldn't figure out why. And it was just absolutely crippling. So I couldn't record episodes. But I'm all better now. So now we can record episodes.
Awesome. I mean, not awesome for that portion of it. That was probably bad wording, but I'm glad to hear you're doing better. We were talking a little bit before we hopped on about how we both feel super awesome today, so we're so excited to be back and filming. And seriously, we thank you guys so much. We were getting views on our content while we were away. We were getting comments and people reaching out, so thank you guys. I had people in my comment section asking when we were coming back, and they were so excited for the podcast. So without any further ado, we are going to get into the topic of llamas.
Llamas!
And I've already posted a short about this on social media, and I wanted to do this with Kit because I knew that Kit was going to nerd out so hard about this. And from what she has explained to me, she has. So if you want to, I'm going to just kind of talk about what I understood the study to be before we get into the actual scientific background of it and what this all means for the world of schizophrenia and the future. So I saw some headlines. I was going to say a few weeks ago, but we've been gone for a little bit, so it might be a few months ago at this point. I was seeing some headlines, people sending me about llamas being a potential cure for schizophrenia. And I'm not going to lie, I thought it was an Onion article or something like that. And so I was like, oh, whatever, that's super weird. But then I started seeing it on, a bunch of different news sites. And so I looked into it a little bit. And from my understanding, the study was kind of going into how certain antibodies in llamas could be a potential way that we look at cures for cognitive portions of schizophrenia. Now, that is a very basic understanding of it, and that's from just what I've read on short articles and headlines. But I reached out to Kit immediately. I literally sent it to her before I did anything else, and I was like, what do you think of this? Is this something you'd be interested in learning more about and talking about on the podcast? She then sent me 12 consecutive texts in a row saying, oh my God, yes, let's do this. I'm so excited. And so Kit, could you tell us a little bit about what this study actually is? And then we'll get into, I have a bunch of questions for you from someone who doesn't understand the scientific side, but tell us a little bit about what this study actually is, what it could possibly mean.
So the big idea was that researchers were able to find a small antibody called a nanobody, not a robot, but they called a nanobody, that could reach and target what are called glutamate receptors in the brain and have an effect on, and this is a mouthful, NMDA receptor hypofunction, which we will get to and I will explain.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Like even as you were reading that, I probably understood about 10% of that. So I'm sure I, along with everyone else, has a ton of questions. I do think the overall idea of this is really interesting, and based on what I understood, the interesting part is we have a lot of medication to treat schizophrenia, but it's mostly for positive symptoms, right? So if I was understanding this correctly, the idea that this could potentially help cognitive symptoms or anything in that realm, this would be relatively new type of treatment or medicine or whatever it is that they're looking into, wouldn't it?
Well, it's important to note here that what they're going off of, that NMDA receptor hypofunction I talked about a second ago, it's based off a certain hypothesis of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
So, do you know about the dopamine and glutamate hypotheses of schizophrenia?
Dopamine, yes, that's been like my most scientific thing I understand about schizophrenia, because from what I understood, this has been the most supported theory of what causes schizophrenia in the brain was an overabundance of dopamine, correct?
Yep.
See, look at that. I'm a scientist, guys.
Yes, dopamine hypothesis. It's great. I love it a lot. It actually explains a lot of things, but there's another hypothesis out there that this paper is going off of, and it's called the glutamate hypothesis. And basically, it also involves a drug doing something very similar to how we discovered the dopamine hypothesis, in the sense that we figured out antipsychotics treated psychosis. And so we're like, okay, obviously an overabundance of dopamine is probably what causes psychosis. But this case, it was done with ketamine and phencyclidine, which are both drugs that cause positive, negative, and cognitive symptoms in humans. And so they do that by disrupting that NMDA receptor that I mentioned before, that glutamate receptor. And so by disrupting that and causing a lack of function with it, that hypofunction, you're disrupting natural processes in the brain. And so the glutamate hypothesis goes, hey, it's probably a glutamate problem because phencyclidine and ketamine cause similar symptoms in schizophrenia. And so the paper operates off the glutamate hypothesis, not the dopamine hypothesis. But
Gotcha.
a lot of people, and a lot of people actually think they can work together. So because the glutamate stuff downstream does affect dopamine. And so they think that basically the dopamine hypothesis explains the classic positive symptoms that you and I both deal with. And then the glutamate hypothesis explains the negative and cognitive symptoms that people deal with.
Yeah, this what I really think would be fascinating about progress in that realm is that a lot of people get to live pretty full and functional lives with traditional antipsychotics that, like we've said, have really targeted the dopamine idea, whereas we talk about this on previous episodes. We did a whole episode just about negative and cognitive symptoms and how prevalent those are in our daily lives despite medication and treatment. I would love in my lifetime to see a way to deal with some of that, because we talked about our issues with memory, our issues taking care of ourselves, stuff like that. So this is really interesting, and I have so many questions. So the first question, which has also been the most asked question I've gotten when I've posted about it, is how do you give a mouse schizophrenia? Because they're saying like, oh, we tested this in mice with schizophrenia. And right away I was like, what? And then I posted my video of it, and every comment was like, there's mice with schizophrenia? So break that down for me first before we get into anything else.
No, that's a great question. And so they used two different models in the study, and both of them were that hypofunction that I mentioned, right? So they had the glutamate disruption, but we're only going to focus on the one that is like classical schizophrenia, right? So that specific mouse model was a drug-induced model. So they basically gave small baby mice phencyclidine, that drug I mentioned earlier, or PCP, it's also known as PCP, and they gave that to these mice at 7, 11, and 13 days. So by doing that, they caused cognitive symptoms that they believed were similar to those found in those with schizophrenia.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's really how they did it.
Along with that, people were asking me a lot. They were because they were like, oh, this has been tested in mice. And my understanding is that's pretty much why this is like something that's still very much in a theory state. Like, it hasn't been human tested. This isn't something that's very progressed. It's just they tested it in young mice. And so that was the biggest question. But then the other question is, why llamas? How are they significant in all this? Like I said in the very beginning of the episode, llamas.
Llamas!
I think that's what's been so attention grabbing about this, right? Like the headlines, everything are like, llamas are going to cure schizophrenia. So why llamas? I guess that's the big question.
Well, researchers needed a small antibody that could get to the brain. And llamas and other animals in the camelid family have the ability to create that small antibody. They have a fancy part of their immune system that does this, that no other like mammal does. But that family can make those small antibodies. And so that's how they figured it out. And they've been a target in other studies as well. Like, it's not just this study that's used those nanobodies, but this is just the one that decided to use it to try to see if they could cross the brain to do stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I did see in the article I read, it said that llamas have been like used in previous ways, like in similar to this, not with this exact study, but but I didn't even know that, so that was really interesting to find out. So you're talking about, the young mice, and you're saying that they gave them this drug that caused cognitive damage, or what they thought could be similar to what a person experienced. Yeah,
it's a model.
So how do they actually test the cognition then?
So that's interesting, because I actually ended up talking with someone who works with mice at work, and we had a sit-down conversation.
Oh, we have a direct source in this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know someone who works with mice, and so we both looked at the tests they use. So it's very. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but we'll get to the thoughts. So what's really interesting is that mice themselves are naturally curious. And scientists, they kind of want that curiosity to be present. Mm-hmm. And when that curiosity is present, you have quote unquote normal cognition. And the way they do this is they do something called the novel object recognition test, or the NOR test for short, where they put the mouse in a little box and they give it two objects that are the exact same. So we're going to say red cubes. Okay? And they're given time to like inspect the red cubes and look at the red cubes and stuff. This is like a training phase. And then after that, after a certain amount of time, it depends on, I don't remember what specifically they used in this experiment, and after a certain amount of time, you put mice in a new box with two different objects. So you have that same thing, that red cube, and then you have, say, a blue sphere. And the idea is that the mouse remembers the training phase, and then will go and spend all their time investigating the new object, so the sphere. And the more time they spend with the sphere, the higher their discrimination index is. That's the value they were looking for. And that's really how they do it, is they see how much time does the mouse spend with the new object, and then that determines this discrimination index, which determines cognition. But the reality about this test is that it's not actually a cognition test. It's a memory test.
Yeah, yep.
It's only a typical memory test. So this is the only, for this mouse model that they did, the one that had the PCP-induced schizophrenia model, this was the only cognitive test they did with those mice.
Okay.
They had another model where they did kind of a rare genetic form of schizophrenia called GRIN1. It's like a genetic mutation that causes symptoms of schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. And they took those mice and put them through different tests. So They didn't do the NOR test. They did two different tests. And so the two groups of mice did not get the same tests across the board, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, that's how they test cognition. They basically see, hey, does the mice like the new object? How much does it like the new object? If it doesn't like the new object, then that's not a positive thing. And what they found was that the discrimination indices for the experimental mice and the control mice were the same for once they gave the medication to the mice up until 7 days after that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So they found that like when they gave it to the mouse and they put them through the test, they had similar discrimination indices to regular mice up to 7 days after the administration.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and you said like this is more, maybe a replica of memory, but memory is a part of cognition, isn't it? Like memory
Yeah.
is a part of cognitive ability.
It is, yeah, but it doesn't test like attention and
Yeah,
concentration or
of
any
course.
other things to deal with. But yeah, no, it is like memory is a huge aspect of cognition for sure.
Awesome.
So
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, based on what I read about the study and stuff, I think that's a really cool way of describing it, because now I have like more insight into like how they did this and how did they give mites schizophrenia and all of these things. So given all of this, it's like really interesting. It's cool. I'm excited to learn more and see more in the future. But what are some of the weaknesses of this study? Because there is with everything, right? Like no scientific study is perfect. There's going to be, problems that might come up in the future. There might be things that, aren't going to make it as promising as it looks. What did you see, or what do you think could be a problem with the future of the study?
well, the NOR test itself is kind of a limitation because, like I said, it's only a typical memory test. It doesn't address other elements of cognition. But the other thing about the NOR test is that it's actually not standardized across labs. So
Oh, okay.
one lab might use different objects than another lab. So what I told you about being the examples, that's not what every lab uses. And so it's not consistent with it. So that's a general weakness of the NOR test that I found when I was doing this. Yeah.
So with all of this information, what do you think, like the future looks like for this? Is there any like studies they're still trying to work on? Do you think this will get to a point of human trials? Do you think this actually could be something to help with future? I know you're not a science, like you're not able to say yes or no specifically, but like, as someone with a more scientific background, like what do you feel? Like what are things that I know you read the whole study, which is crazy. Thank you for doing that for this episode. But like, what
Got
are
it right
some
here. Got it right here.
got it ready to go. What are some things you took away, and like, are you hopeful for this being something that could help with memory or cognitive ability in the future?
I guess when it comes down to this type of study, the main thing they were trying to do was not provide solutions to people with schizophrenia. It was to show that you could have a nanobody reach the brain and have an effect.
Okay.
So their future directions are to most likely try it with other brain disorders, because the wild thing to me was that I read the news articles and I saw the headlines, but the actual title of the paper, this is a mouthful, stay with me, is Nanobody Therapy Rescues Behavioral Deficits of NMDA Receptor Hypofunction.
Okay.
If you notice, schizophrenia is not mentioned. And actually, it wasn't even mentioned in the abstract either.
Okay.
So the study itself wasn't necessarily meant to help schizophrenia. It was more to show that nanobodies could reach the brain and have an effect. So if we're going to translate this whole thing and the fact that they did actually, they did research with, schizophrenic mice. If we are to actually look at down the line what this could be, is that someone might take this and be like, hey, let's look into this. And maybe these people will. But someone could take it and maybe like get started on something. But I think the future directions are it takes a long time to get things from a mouse to a human. And it would take a very, very long time. But I think it's very interesting that this is one of the things in recent years that shows that there could be something that would affect cognition in people with those issues. Because, like you said, there's no treatment for it right now. We know that the glutamate hypothesis might be a thing, like it's out there, but we have nothing to actually like help what supposedly the glutamate problem causes. And so it's very fascinating to me that stuff like this is being done. And I do think it is promising, but I think the focus of the research was a little bit more towards just showing they could help brain disorders rather than showing they could help schizophrenia, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I talked about this to you when I sent it to you. One of my questions was, couldn't this also be, something that they might look into for if they're specifically looking at cognitive ability, memory, stuff like that. My first thought was Alzheimer's and dementia, which people with schizophrenia also have incredibly high rates of. My mind also went straight to there. So
yeah, no, that actually would be pretty cool. I don't know if this type of nanobody therapy would help that kind of thing, but I'd be really interested to find out how, because that would be Oh, that would be so cool if they could figure out how to like help that, because there are some medications out there that help with Alzheimer's, but as
Yeah.
we know, it still progresses and gets worse and worse over time. So
Yeah. And the last the last story I was going to tell you here, when I told Allison about this, I read her the title, and she's like, "I'm confused. Does that mean you have to get like a schizophrenia pet llama to bring with you places?" Which I was like,
give the llama phencyclidine.
yeah, I was like, hey, hear me out. I would do that for sure. I'm like, llama service animal? You don't have to ask me twice. I will bring a llama with me to the airport.
But I don't want to, by the way, I don't want to dismiss that this is technically a paradigm shift for how brain disorders are treated.
Yeah,
I do want to make that, even if the study wasn't originally what I thought it was, it is still a big shift in potentially how we can treat brain issues, brain disorders, because schizophrenia is a brain disorder for sure.
100%.
And it's very interesting to me that this is the thing, because again, it operates off that different hypothesis, and so it's kind of interesting that like they did something that kind of supports that hypothesis, you know?
Yeah. Well, and so I'm sure you definitely agree with me, not only as a patient, but as, you know, someone in the science world. I'm always excited to see any form of innovation, right? Because to me, that says, hey, we're still trying to figure this out. I get so worried that we've given up on, you know, trying to have people with schizophrenia live even more functional and livable lives. You know, as a patient who, you know, I've been on a lot of different medications, and I've had varying levels of cognitive ability and positive and negative symptoms, like all of that. I just love to know that it's still being looked into. There's still research being done, and that gives me a lot of hope for the future. So, I would assume you'd agree, like any innovation is exciting and is good, especially in the world of schizophrenia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that they were able to like get schizophrenic mice to have a memory that was similar to a control mouse after just giving them a nanobody therapy, like just for this one day, and they were able to have a quote unquote normal memory essentially for 7 days after being given the nanobody. And I don't know what happens after 7 days. They didn't really say that, but 7 days it lasted. I mean, it was almost like an off switch to a degree.
Yeah.
Like just literally, like because beforehand the discrimination indices were not good, but the mice that were induced with the phencyclidine and were not given the nanobody performed significantly lower than the mice that were given the nanobody. Like there was a visual difference on the graph that they showed, and it was very significant to me. I was like, that's really cool. So yeah. Wild, absolutely wild.
Well, and that's, you know, I'm always so hopeful for new stuff, and because like patients, I feel like we're so exhausted. I have people ask me all the time. They're like, oh, like how long are you going to be on medication? And so I'm like, it's lifelong, you know, it's a lifelong illness. Yeah. I do have people ask me that they're like, oh, how long are you going to have? I'm like, this is a lifelong illness. It doesn't just go away. So I'm always excited to see progress in treatment of any form, like even new medications, stuff like that. I just like the idea that we haven't been forgotten as a patient population. I like the idea that people are still working to try to improve our lives.
So would you, given the option to like get an injection of a llama antibody to like have your cognition be improved, would you do it?
You know what? I feel like I would. I definitely I would be more keen on getting an emotional support llama, but I will do it if necessary. You know, I'm the type of person who, like I said, I'm very excited about innovation, all of that. So if it came out and there was promising studies and they actually tested it on humans, and like, yeah, of course, we talked about this in the episode of, you know, negative and cognitive symptoms. I get so upset about my cognitive delay and, you know, my memory and stuff. It's really the one thing that I continue to struggle with no matter what. So I would love to see something that could help that. So yeah, I would, you know, shoot me up with those llama antibodies, I guess.
The nanobodies that are not robots.
Yeah, not robots, guys.
Not robots.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, how about you? Is that something? Is that you're a scientist? You got to be curious enough to do that kind of
I
stuff,
totally
right?
would. Absolutely, I would. Sign me up. Sign me up.
I feel like me and you are in the
Not
front of
right
that line. We're like, come on, let's do it.
Like, yo, I will talk about this. Like, I will.
Yeah, we'll have to see if they ever come out with this. Be like, yo, guys, hear me out. Sponsor the podcast. Sponsor the podcast. Let's do it. Oh man, but yeah, so really interesting. I thank you so much for doing the research on this, and you know, I knew you would have so much fun. I just remember you messaging me like a few days in, and you're like, "Oh my god, this is so interesting!" And like, I'm so glad we got to do a more science based episode. I hope the viewers loved it. Do you have any like last notes? Any final thoughts on this?
I just do want to say the nanobody. It targeted a specific glutamate receptor in the brain.
Okay.
Which is very specific, and specificity is very good when it comes to developments for drugs and medications and stuff, because a lot of things will just go everywhere, and it'll just, a few of the targets are the goal, but there's also the everywhere, which is what causes side effects in a lot of things. KarXT is that way, and so this one being just targeting that one glutamate receptor that had the specificity with it is like really cool and really really exciting in terms of like developments of medications and stuff.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for doing all the research on this and looking into it for me and answering all my questions, because I was super curious about this. And once again, thank you to the listeners for understanding, you know, we needed some time off, and we are so grateful for you guys. And please be sure to, you know, check out our upcoming episodes. We're finally back to recording. We're finally, you know, getting back in the groove of things. We are super pumped, super excited. And we have a bunch of new stuff coming up that we're really, really excited to show you guys. So, Kit, any final words for the folks?
Yeah, guys, wherever you are watching this episode, do like and rate it. Leave us a comment. We love to hear your thoughts. If you have guest suggestions, if you have topic suggestions, we do listen to you. So if you want to be heard, drop a comment, leave a like, all that good stuff. And follow if you haven't already followed. But if you don't want to do all that and just want to reach us absolutely directly, we are schizandgiggles@gmail.com. That is Schiz, SCHIZ, like schizophrenia. And then Giggles is all spelled out. And also on our other social platforms, we are Schiz and Giggles. That's Schiz like schizophrenia, and all spelled out, and then Giggles.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for listening and supporting and helping us keep this podcast going. Kit, what are your final words for the folks?
Guys, remember, the brain is a minefield, and we brought flip-flops.